I wanted to do one of the kind of from that great period of us being giant killing experts, really. So I was looking at a few different options. I didn't actually go to the Southampton game because I had flu. I remember watching it on at home and having a kind of Lazarus-like recovery from being kind of tucked up under a duvet to knee sliding across the carpet when the fourth goal went in. And obviously, I'd put Everton up on a pedestal, but I think a lot of people have covered that one off. But that was obviously an incredible experience. But the one I picked out is actually the West Ham game in the FA Cup. I think it was the third round in that 99-2000 season. And if I'm right, I think it was only a couple of days before the Middlesbrough League Cup quarter final. I think we had the two of them in very close succession. But it was one of those. It was one of those moments where you just feel incredibly proud of your club, and I think those are the things that really often stay with you as a fan, because it was a really packed out Prenton Park. I think I looked up the attendance; it was about 13,500. And I just remember a wall of noise from before the game through, just continual chanting of Super White Army, and you could tell, I know Upton Park at the time. I think they were still at Upton Park at the time. It has its own reputation and was quite a close. The stands were quite close to the pitch, but you could just see the impact this was having on the West Ham players of just this kind of cauldron of noise being generated by the home fans. And they had some team out as well. I think if you look back at some of those giant killing games, a lot of the teams were playing had good players, but this was a West Ham side with Frank Lampard, Paulo Di Canio, Rio Ferdinand, Joe Cole. This was a really top group of players.
I reckon, Rob, other than the 1-0 victory over Arsenal in 1973, I reckon this is probably the highest quality team that Tranmere have ever beat.
I think
the only one that probably comes close is Leeds a year later or a season later in the League Cup, when Leeds had kind of a mixed side out. Huckabee was playing. Certainly Robinson was in goal for them at the very early stages of his career, but they had a mixed side out because they were still involved in the Champions League. The West Ham side that day had Shaka Hislop in goal. Their back four was Neil Ruddock, Potts, Scott Minto from the Wirral, and Rio Ferdinand. They had Frank Lampard, Trevor Sinclair, Mark Vivian Foe, and Joe Cole in midfield, and Steve Lomas, and then Paulo Di Canio up front with Paul Kitson and latterly Paulo Wanchop coming off the bench. That side has got, I reckon, 4 players who went to the World Cup in 2002 in it. Certainly England players. I might be wrong, but I'm pretty sure Ferdinand, Lampard, Sinclair and Cole all went to the 2002 World Cup. Apologies if they didn't all. Di Canio was a significant player as well. Yeah. Hislop was a very good goalkeeper. Neil Ruddock, we know what he did for Liverpool, and Scott Minto was very talented as well. I think this is, other than that Arsenal side, probably the best quality team Tranmere have ever beaten.
And it was one of those games where we score and then we just put up a wall and they just couldn't get through us. It was an amazing. We were quite low down. I think we couldn't. I usually sit in the Kop about halfway up, and I seem to remember in that game we were pretty much like front or second row. So it was so close to the pitch, and you could really see and hear the players and the kind of frustration from the West Ham team, and everyone giving everything to Di Canio when he was coming down to. I think he was probably on the corners, and that Nick Henry goal was just so special. And it's nice to be able to include something that came from a Challoner long throw in this roundup, because it was such a weapon at the time, and it kind of felt all kind of tied in with that pressure from the fans. It was almost like we will that ball to be like, right in the mixer, and then things happened, didn't they? And it's got to be one of the best kind of left-footed volleys I've ever seen. Just set the tone. I'm pretty sure it was pretty early on. Although I remember he also scored that incredible early strike against Bolton.
So 21 minutes this goal against West Ham. Without having it in front of me, I think the one against Bolton might have been about 5 or 8 minutes, but they're basically a carbon copy of each other. A Challoner long throw into the box, which is partially cleared to the edge of the area. Yeah. And Nick Henry's there waiting to thump it home.
Yeah, and in one of those, and I can't remember which one it was, I remember in the post-match interview, someone saying to Nick Henry, "Well, you're not always, you're not always first choice," and he was really affronted, and he was, "What do you mean I am first choice?" But yeah, it was, and we just shut him out. I watched the highlights back before, and Rio Ferdinand misses a kind of sitter from a back pass free kick, because Joe Murphy's been adjudged to have picked a ball up from a back pass, which I think was a very harsh decision. I mean, amazing that Joe Murphy was there as well at the time, still with us now. And they had a couple of chances. They had some half chances. There was a couple of good saves, but just absolutely deserved it. And I remember after the game, Redknapp was very complimentary and just said that they couldn't find the answers to us. And like you say, that was that side that they put out was such a top collection of players with world class internationals in there. And it was one of those moments where you just felt so proud of your club. And like I say, I think only a few days later we were in the stand for Middlesbrough with probably one of the best goals I've ever seen, which was the Achterberg throw to Parkinson. So it was just a great time to be a Tranmere fan, wasn't it? I think despite the league situation and obviously going down that season, it did feel in those cup games that we could beat anybody. And I do think you're right. I think that West Ham team was probably the best team we faced in that run. And
not necessarily the best team we faced, but the best team we beat, because the Liverpool team that we lost to was incredible, wasn't it? Yeah. And the Newcastle team obviously had Shearer and I think Ferguson and Gary Speed. I'm just looking at it now. 13,629 the attendance. Do you know who the referee was? Very high profile referee.
Was it Uriah Rennie?
It was Dermot Gallagher.
Dermot Gallagher. Oh wow.
Dermot Gallagher was the man in the middle for this one, and he handed out the only yellow card of the game to Trevor Sinclair. You talked about watching the highlights back. I mean, this period for me is absolute peak Tranmere for what I saw, because my first game wasn't until 95, so I missed the time under King. But those games under Aldo, those cup successes for me is if I was to be transported back to a time when I was watching Tranmere, it'd be either that Boreham Wood game under Mellon, or it'd be any of probably 10, 15 games under Aldo. And don't you just love watching back the highlights of footage of around this time? And there are so many things that I think if I mention to you, you'll immediately be able to picture them. Medicash on the sponsor boards. The ball boys from Shaftesbury Youth Club in their tracksuits, all of whom had a towel.
Yeah.
The old tunnel, which was amazing. Obviously, the stands haven't changed a great deal, but you can picture the shirts. All the players, for some reason, seem to wear ill-fitting kits. They all had baggy kits and baggy shorts, particularly Gareth Roberts, because they clearly only had a one size short and his were far too long. The captain's armband was never an armband. It was always just a piece of masking tape that they seemed to put around, like Wayne Allison or whoever was skipper that day, depending on whether Clint Hill was suspended or not. They're just watching the footage back. Aldo with his goatee, with his Patrick tracksuit, leaning on the sponsor board of the dugout, which then people may forget was the dugout closer to that season to the cowshed, and it switched for the following season when away fans went in the cowshed instead of the Kop. But back in that season, the home dugout was the one at the cowshed side of the stadium. There's just so many things that you can just picture them immediately, and I love watching back old footage of those games because it brings back those memories.
Yeah, and I think we also things like having the Kop split with home and away fans was a really interesting period as well. And I think there were a couple of games we might have given away sides the whole Kop, which thankfully we don't have that anymore, because that does kind of ruin that kind of thing. I don't think we did. I remember that West Ham game as being all home fans in the Kop, but I don't know if that can be right. I can't remember when that changed. But yeah, I remember you used to have Sheedy there, didn't you, next to Aldo as well, and remember things like I love the red numbers on the kit that season. It's just such a different thing for us. And I also remember the season after that when we released that kit with the blue kind of almost Adidas type stripes on the top shoulders, and thinking it looked quite cut like a European kind of kit. So there was some quite big shifts around there, from the Patrick to the Zara, and yeah, no, but they are really special memories, and like you say, you can watch those videos back and never ever get bored of it, and it transports you straight back. So I feel very lucky to have been how old I would have been then. So I would have been 20 in 2003. So yeah, I was kind of 17, 18, kind of 19 through that period as we were going to Wembley and going through those cup runs. That Coventry home game was incredible. I think the only one I didn't go to in that run was Barnsley. I went to both legs of the Bolton, and the away leg was an incredible experience. And I think I might have mentioned to you earlier, but yeah, the indignity of the disallowed Marn goal, and I'm pretty sure they must have had it on replays at half time, because I remember us going into the stand and seeing it on the screen, and everyone was kind of, obviously before we had it on our phones to just go back and look at, and just hoping that wasn't going to cost us, and obviously thankfully it didn't. But yeah, so I thought definitely one of those games needed to be in the run, and obviously a lot of people would pick Everton or Southampton or Middlesbrough from that couple of years, but that West Ham game just had something special, and I do think it felt to me the best atmosphere. I don't know whether it was the biggest attendance or just it was the magnitude of the opposition or whatever it was, but I remember it being an incredible atmosphere.